Good evening. On Scythian Tabiti, invoked as protector goddess for the king, a further illumination of the might of the radiant queen of the Indo-Europeans, via the light of Vedic Aditi, the Scythians, as storm-born host of her children. Now, a bit of a preamble before we get down to the business. This piece resulted from a digression in my earlier work illustrating the strong parallel expression of Scythian Tabiti with Vedic Saraswati/Aditi, and in distancing the often counted spurious speculationism around a potential connection with Hindu Tapati, who is, in the Indo-European mythic comparanda, Helen of Troy. I excised it from the original piece due to reasons of length, a rarity for me, but I'm getting better with this, and also due to the rather speculative nature of the direction of my own inferences in that which follows. However, at the encouragement of a respected associate with good knowledge of the field, I chose to finish it as its own somewhat standalone contribution, and let the reader judge for themselves whether there is further probative value in this conjecture. Although while the prospective reasoning for the Scythian king Idanthyrsus invoking Tabiti alongside Papeos when facing down Darius is my own speculation, the springboard which this provides for discussing the broader and vitally integral role of the Indo-European radiant queen of the heavens in a military as well as a metaphysical sense and context, means that large swathes of what follows are upon much firmer ground. Let's begin. But to return to the Scythians, and in particular Idanthyrsus, of whom I have so often written, it is the functional use of Tabiti within their speech that has often intrigued me. For you see, when Darius is imperiously, some would say impotently or petulantly, demanding King Idanthyrsus' surrender, and that he acknowledged Darius as his rightful lord, indeed the lord of every nation that would be world conqueror, Idanthyrsus powerfully replies that he acknowledges no lord, no ruler of him other than Papeos, his paternal forebear, that is to say Zeus, the sky father, and Tabiti, the Scythian queen. Now in some ways it is quite remarkable that we should hear this, not because of Idanthyrsus' claim of patrilineal descent from the sky father, a pedigree similarly claimed by another man who caused the Persians under another Darius no end of grief, Alexander the Great, which may lead one to ponder whether the sky father had some certain reason for wishing to do the Zoroastrians and their empire quite some harm, but rather because of this pointed invocation of Tabiti. There is a martial context in this exchange with Darius which is occurring. Idanthyrsus has been accused of cowardice and has been demanded to meet the Persians for open battle. Serious honour is at stake, as is the freedom of his people, and potentially the integrity of the Scythians' ancestral tombs, which Idanthyrsus had just dared the Persians to attempt to interfere with. The invocation of Tabiti would also serve to remind everyone of her patronage. This is, after all, exactly what is meant by having a lord, a ruler, a queen, and her protection. And if I am correct in my assertion that Tabiti is the same goddess of the Indo-Europeans as Saraswati, then this would become virtually mandatory in its resonancy for what is required of the king. After all, this is exactly why even the gods themselves pray to her in the Hindu mythology, for strength and cunning, and overwhelming force with which to crush the often demonic adversary, see the foe driven before them, and make sure that it knows not to come back, via virtue of having hurt so incredibly badly, and cut up into little tiny pieces. I am under the sovereignty of this god, to whom I am related, and this goddess, to whom we all bow, is therefore no mere idle boast upon the part of Idanthyrsus. It is a statement of both warning and of warding. So why is it that I suggest that this is remarkable? Partially, I admit, it is because it is another part to the constellation of mythic and historic instances which serve to demonstrate that the archaic Indo-European view hold a rather different perspective upon female figures of note than many would care to admit, and such a thing is always worth remarking upon. But it is also because it accords very well with what we should expect for this goddess in ritualine or proto-ritualine usage, as the result of the aforementioned parallels of Saraswati and Aditi, although I'll repeat myself thrice. There are 1.5 other reasons why this incident and its interpretation are noteworthy, for as we shall soon see, they posit the Scythians as having a rather interesting and elevated view of themselves, upon the basis of the chief instance of Darius and Aditi being invoked together in Vedic scripture, but more upon that later. For the moment, let us illustrate this earlier point concerning the role and function of Aditi as the protector goddess, the protective mother. Aditi as protector, the lawful ruler of the skies. Rigveda Mandala 4, Hymnal 55, line 1. Who of you, Vasus, saveth? Who protecteth? O heaven, Deities, and earth and Aditi, preserve us. Line 7. May goddess Aditi with the gods defend us. Save us, the Saviour God, with care unceasing. Atharvaveda 7:6. We call for help, the Queen of law and order, great mother of all those whose ways are righteous, far spread, unwasting, strong in her dominion, Aditi, wisely leading, well protecting. Earth, our strong guard, incomparable heaven, Aditi, wisely leading, well protecting. Let us bring hither, in pursuit of riches, Aditi with our word, the mighty mother. Her in whose lap the spacious air is lying, may she afford us triply guarding shelter. Rigveda, Mandala 8:18. With gods come thou, whose fostering care none checks, O goddess Aditi. Come, dear to many, with the lords who guard us well. For well those sons of Aditi know to keep enmities aloof, unrivalled, giving ample room, they save from woe. Aditi, guard our herd by day. Aditi, free from guile by night. Aditi, ever strengthening, save us from grief. And in the day our hymnal is this: may Aditi come nigh to help. With loving kindness bring us weal and chase our foes. Rigveda, Mandala 10, Hymnal 63, line 10. Mightily saving earth, incomparable heaven, the good guide Aditi, who gives secure defence. Rigveda, Mandala 8, Hymnal 47. Resting in you, O gods, we are like men, who fight in coats of mail. Ye guard us from each great offence, ye guard us from each lighter fault. May Aditi defend us, may Aditi guard and shelter us, mother of wealthy Mitra and of Aryaman and Varuna. The shelter, gods, that is secure, auspicious, free from melody, a sure protection, triply strong, even that do ye extend us. Rigveda, Mandala 8, Hymnal 56. And thee too, O great Aditi, thee also, goddess, I address, thee very gracious to assist. Save us, in depth and shallow from the foe, thou mother of strong sons. Let no one of our seed be harmed. Rigveda, Mandala 10, Hymnal 66. May Indra and the Vasus keep our dwelling safe, and Aditi with Adityas lend us sure defence. May God Rudra with the Rudras favour us, and Tvashtar with dames further us to success. White Yajurveda 21, line 5. We call to succour us the mighty mother of those who sway is just, the queen of order, strong ruler, far expanding, never decaying, Aditi, glorious guide and good protectress. Sinless may we ascend, for we'll this vessel rowed with the good oars, divine that never leaketh. Earth our strong guard, incomparable heaven, Aditi, gracious guide and good protectress. Atharvaveda 6:4. May Tvashtar, Brahmanaspati, Parjanya hear my holy prayer. May Aditi with all her sons, the brothers, guard us, invincible, protecting power. May Ansa, Bhaga, Varuna and Mitra, Aryaman, Aditi and Maruts guard us. May we be freed from that oppressor's hatred. May he keep off the foeman who is near us. There are, of course, literal litanies of further examples, but I think that I have made my point. Aditi is frequently invoked, whether by herself or with her associated gods, for protection and empowerment. Interestingly, a number of these instances, including some that I have not quoted above, make pointed reference to Aditi in relation to regality. In one occurrence, Atharva Veda 3.8, she is called upon in order to empower a man with the facility of being a leader, a ruler, a king. And this should prove perhaps unsurprising, given the manner in which mythic resonancy, the eternal return and mythic recurrence, are called upon in the course of Indo-European holy rites. The principle of as above, so below. You will perhaps be more immediately familiar with it as. Just as Aditi is the centre of the universe and in possession of truly mighty power, the literally lawful sovereign, so too is she called upon here to impart and to invest a similar saliency on a much smaller scale to the mortal regent of his people, the dual empowerments of centrality and nourishment to his clan, as well as that of holy divine law. And thus, just as she protects her gods, as we can see quite eloquently described in various Devi mythology around ferocious acts of demon slaying, as well as the relevant Vedic scriptural elements of so which often write, so she is called upon to protect her other children amidst the races and the realms of Manu, that being man, Manus, or Manu, in English, Germanic, and Sanskrit terms respectively. Just as she seemingly marshals the forces under her, and there is more detail upon this contained in Arvi 10, 125.6, so too is the moral mortal ruler, regarded as acting likewise with his forces, his men, his children, for he is their sire, at his command. And it is just exactly at that point where things get really interesting, and somewhat hypothetical upon my part. For there is a further point of mythic resonancy which must be explored. However, before we do so, it is necessary to go back a stage and set out some additional parameters for interpretatio Scythonem in this context. Now, in various of the Vedic hymnals that I have quoted above, it might at first appear that there are three figures involved: earth, heaven, and Aditi. This both is and isn't the case. It is the case insofar as that is literally what is there upon the page. However, it isn't quite the case in terms of the actual divinities being called to and referred to, insofar as we have quite repeated annotations, mostly but not exclusively found within the Brahmana ritual explications and commentary layers of the Vedas, that Aditi is the earth, and is also given the first oblation, just as Tabiti is. This fits, in fact, with the material we also have, both from the Vedas, as well as comparative Indo-European mythology and religion, wherein the wife of the Sky Father is simultaneously both an Earth Mother and a radiant Heavenly Queen. Aspects might be one way to look at this, and that is probably rather closer to the mark. Hence, what we are calling out to at particular points in rites and rituals is emphasizing the particular facing of the deity in question that we are asking for help for, their specific competency, and the manner in which we are asking to have their power made manifest for us upon our behalf. The analogy I often use is a political one, wherein the same politician may simultaneously be the Minister of Education and the Minister of Defense. But if we are seeking help with a matter in a school, unless things have seriously escalated in the classroom, we are probably going to be better served by writing to the person in question under his or her title of Minister of Education rather than Defense, even if things may eventually get to the same man or woman via other channels, other means. Similarly, if we are in a situation, a scenario, wherein multiple competencies and multiple portfolio areas are relevant, it can be quite clear and specific about what sort of assistance we are seeking. It helps to be this, of course. Otherwise, we can hardly complain if something other than what we had envisaged nor intended actually results from the request. So, when we are seeing these mentions made for earth and for heaven, often in Dvanva compound, and there are several, as well as Aditi, it is my belief that these are two gods being called to rather than three. The Sky Father, Deios, heaven, and his celestial consort, Aditi, Vach, in just the same manner that we see Idanthyrsus invoke both Papeos, the Sky Father, and Tabiti. I point further up for reasons that shall become clear in other works. Invoke, I might add, in terms emphasizing the regal rulership of the Scythian queen, as he puts it, in question, as we have seen with the Vedic hymnals for Aditi. Exactly what we should expect, as this is precisely one of the most prominent terms utilized when we are asking her for her assistance, empowerment, and protection against the foe. All of which brings me to that previously heralded, somewhat hypothetical point in my interpretation. The Scythians, as storm-born sons of the Sky Father. Rigveda Mandala 10, Hymnal 77, which is one of the key and quite interesting occasions where Deios and Aditi are mentioned side by side, or more specifically, are both cited side by side as the mother and father of the Maruts, something which we should entirely be expecting, given that Rudra is, of course, the frequently attested father of the Maruts, and as we all know, Rudra is Deios. The linkage of Aditi to the Maruts is, however, somewhat more surprising upon the surface. The more usual name affixed to the mother of Maruts is Prisni. However, as it turns out, this theonym in translation simultaneously refers to both earth and light, or the starlit night sky, exactly what we should expect for Aditi, the radiant queen of the heavens. To quote from the hymnal in question, "The youths have wrought their ornaments for glory through many nights. This noble band of Maruts, like stags, the sons of Deios have striven onward, the sons of Aditi grown strong like pillars. They who extend beyond earth and heaven, by their own mass, as from the clouds spread Thuria. Like mighty heroes, covetous of glory, the heavenly gallants, who destroy the wicked. When ye come nigh, as in the depth of waters the earth is loosened, as it were, and shaken. Like self-bright falcons, punishers of wicked men, like hovering birds urged forward, scattering rain around. Knowing of Vasus, boons that should be granted, even from a far drive, back the men who hate us." Now why should this be interesting to us? Other than setting out of a relationship between Deios and Aditi, and the rather important implications which this has for the underlying Indo-European theology of which they are emblematic, it is due to the declaratory designation of the Maruts as the sons of Deios, the Sky Father, and also the sons of Aditi. What do we see Idanthyrsus so proudly declare in his defiant declamation to Darius? That he and his lineage are themselves also the sons of Deios. It is not directly stated in Herodotus' rendering that they are likewise the sons of Tabiti, although given the natural confluence of queen with the mother of the nation, correlate as a counterpart to how the king is the sire of the nation, and what we have just multifacetedly demonstrated via the relationship of Deios, Petar, and Aditi. I do not think that it is an unreasonable inference to make surrounding Tabiti, being invoked immediately after Papeos, given Papeos' designation in Idanthyrsus' speech as his ancestor. Perhaps the original formulation for Idanthyrsus' remark had both overtly stated to be ancestors. Perhaps it was felt unnecessary to make explicit mention of the ancestry from the great goddess herself, as mayhap, even when the divine is the fulcrum, patrilineal descent might still be the dominant descriptor. Perhaps we are supposed to read rather directly that Tabiti, being the Scythian queen, and Idanthyrsus, a Scythian king, means that this queen is in fact his royal ancestor likewise. I shall perhaps get around to considering some of these issues further in the Sons of the Sun series continuation, looking specifically at the Scythian sons in due course. But the reason why I have chosen to mention all of this here, indeed, the point and purpose to which I have been building up this piece, is for another, closely related line of speculation. In previous works, I have noted the rather remarkable degree of concordance between the Scythians, and I mean in the broad sense, Sakas, Turanians, in the older sense of course, and other post-Andronovo Indo-Iranic steppe tribes are in mind. And what we find mentioned of the Maruts, the Vrachas, the Wild Hunt even. The reasoning for this I have often presumed to be a sort of racial memory, a recollection of when the ancestors of those more settled and sedentary peoples who had migrated further in both distance and lifestyle from the Proto-Indo-European Urhimat had acted similarly, and therefore an association with the retinue of the Sky Father and his sons, for the behaviours and the accouterments, the equipment we see in the much later, but by then contemporaneous to these accounts, Scythians. Some proof of this might be found in the curiously specific traits affixed to various of this retinue of Rudra raiders, wherein they are shooters, skewerers, literally the underlying etymology of Scythian, mounted upon various antlered creatures such as deer or stags or antelopes, which is rather curious given the reasonable prominency of horses seemingly right throughout the Indo-European sphere, up until you consider the archaeologically attested Scythian practice of having their decidedly equine steeds on fake antlers or horns designed to imitate a stag or an antelope. It is something which would almost seem too far-fetched to be true, but for the fact that, as I say, we have literally got the hard evidence to prove this. Best known, perhaps, are the fantastic and wide-flaring imitation of a stag's antlers unearthed at Pazyryk. However, large and round pairs of horns, vaguely reminiscent of those of an ibex, have also been found, amidst other designs. The Scythians, in other words, did not just ride horses, but in the eyes of those they encountered, rode far more exotic creatures besides, creatures which, as I earlier noted, happen to have the defining features of those various Vahanas, upon which we found the servants and sons of Shiva to be mentioned in the Vedic conceptual syllabary. The Maruts themselves are most definitely included. Indeed, that last Rigvedic hymnal I had quoted from, RV X77, directly refers to the Maruts, these sons of the Sky Father, as being akin to stags. Perhaps this is in reference to their steeds, in the same manner that in more archaic English to speak of horse in a military context may in fact refer to a unit of horsemen. Perhaps the lightning of the Maruts' coming and weapons resembles the branching of the antlers of the stag, or perhaps this is the same iconographic root as that which informs the rather prominent association of the golden stag with the Scythians and their nobility, which some have sought to proffer as the potential symbol in relation to Tabiti herself. So the notion of the Scythians, as both looking and acting in manner resonant to the Indo-European mythological memory of the retinue of the Sky Father, seems not merely plausible in correlation, but rather plausible in an outright causative sense as well, too. But why did the Scythians themselves see themselves in this way? Well, in a sense, yes. You have Idanthyrsus' own remarks of being of divine descent, something, to be sure, not entirely unremarkable amidst the great kings of the ancient world. And there is also an excellent line found elsewhere in Herodotus' Persian Wars, wherein the Scythians have professed to liberate a group of Ionian Greeks that were subjects of Darius, and who were at the time holding a certain vital bridge which represented Darius' exit strategy out of Scythia. To quote directly from it, "Now, Ionians, the numbered days are past, and you do wrongly to remain still here. Nay, for it is fear which has e'er kept you now from departing. Now break the bridge with all speed, and go your ways in freedom and happiness, thanking the gods and the Scythians. As for him that was once your master, we will leave him in such plight that never again will he lead his army against any other nation." End quote. I have often pondered whether the implicit sense here is that the Scythians are suggesting that they are acting on behalf of the gods as their instrument, something which again is not uncommensurate with the manner in which those various Shivite sons and soldiers, seers and servants conducted themselves. Or whether, in some sense, the Scythians were asserting, to a plausibly terrified Greek audience, that they were in fact to be counted midst the gods. In the sense as we have previously encountered, that the Maruts and such like are to be thought of perhaps demigods. This might be closer to the mark. Certainly divine beings, even in thundering hooved operation, down here upon this earth. As I say, this notion of the Scythians self-envisioning as whatever their linguistic and mythic equivalent of Maruts might have been, is hypothetical, and not really provable one way or the other on the basis of the available evidence. It would surprise me, or rather I should say it would not surprise me given what we know, and also what we know is viable, upon the basis of the comparative Indo-European mythology and attendant culture. The Nepali army, to take but one example, even to this day convenes itself as a Gana, that is to say a tribe or a company, of Shiva, in a somewhat familial sense. The Einherjar, admittedly after death, comprised of the best of Scandinavian nobility, were hailed as Odin's sons. So whether or not Idanthyrsus was consciously invoking something akin to Arvi 1077, when stating his divine descent and patronage from on high to Darius, while standing at the head of a massed war host of stag-antlered and curve-horned cavalrymen, and directly imputing that he and they, that is to say Idanthyrsus and his Scythians, were those sons of the Sky Father somewhat specifically. That certainly appears to be the message which could reasonably be inferred, as was probably meant to be. After all, if one means to oppose a would-be world emperor, who better to send than the true scions of the sovereigns of the skies? Jai Mata Di, Jai Ishvara, Jai Aditi.